But as I said, the main man is here. Deputy Reform and MP for Boston and Skegness, Richard Tice. A very good afternoon. How are you?
Well, I'm a bit, I don't know really, Jeremy, because I'm tired of asking questions in the House of Commons of ministers and Secretary of State, perfectly reasonable and fair questions, and never getting an answer.
Well, I think you need to wind your neck in, young man, because you've only been an MP for a matter of weeks, and you stood up and you simply said...
6 months.
Well, 6 months. But, I mean, fancy asking the Chancellor of the Exchequer, when does she think the British economy will start growing again? You can't just throw stuff around like this. Why would the Chancellor know this, Richard Tice?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I mean, we would have thought that Rachel from Accounts would know this sort of detail, or at least be able to give the tens of millions of interested citizens of the United Kingdom some form of idea. I mean, is it going to be this month? Is it going to be 6 months' time? What's quite clear is that everybody I talk to, people are extremely concerned that the economy is falling. The last 2 months of data that we've got, which is September and October, shows that it's falling. The next data's out on Thursday. I think that will continue the trend. And we can see the currency markets and the bond markets, clearly they're selling off because they think that our economy is going south, and the quantity of our debt and the cost of our debt is heading north. And
it's
that's a very bad combination.
It's interesting. We've had many conversations in the last few months about how seemingly this Labour Party has very little in terms of plans. They don't seem to understand the depth of feelings about immigration, about the rape gangs, all that sort of stuff. But if you strip it down, and we've got so much to talk about, but Rachel Reeves, again, to me, just a sort of... I'm not even talking about her talent or her inability. I don't know about that. There's just nothing that sort of inspires me to believe that this woman can help this country turn a corner. I mean, yesterday, Starmer appointed a former Treasury aide as another blow. He refused to back her. When we were on air, Downing Street came out and said, she will be the Chancellor. Well, if she's as useless as we all believe, he's then going to have to get rid of her, which is also going to undermine his authority. She looks to me as well, Richard, I'm really interested in your opinion. Every time she gets asked a question, not just by you, but I saw on that foreign trip, she looks like rabbits in the headlights. She looks out of her depth already, doesn't she?
She does look like someone who's rather sort of timid, generally, and particularly, funny enough, when she's reading her statements. In fairness, credit where credit's due, I thought she was more confident in the chamber than I expected. And you could say the other side of that coin is that she's just being deluded and completely out of touch with the reality. And I suspect maybe it's the latter. Yeah. And I'm just being a bit too generous, as is my way. But I have no confidence, frankly, that any of them on the front bench have any idea about how to actually make money, grow things, and create motivation for people to take risks, to be entrepreneurs. I think they're absolutely clueless. And whether it's her or if she was replaced with anybody, I have no confidence that anybody else knows what they're doing either.
I think that's what's very interesting for me about your party, about reform. It's okay, you've got 5 MPs, but all of them have built successful businesses. I spoke to Rupert on the show yesterday, and he was making the point about the health service and how, you know, you might well have to privatise certain segments. It might well be that people have to, you know, segregate tax off and make a decision, stuff that hasn't been thought of before. We had a conversation about how GPs today, Richard, get bonuses from the government on how many people are signed up to their surgery, not how many bloody people they see at an appointment. So stuff that makes perfect sense. But you look at Reeves and you look at Starmer, and we found out yesterday, apparently, Lammy has also been told he'll be Foreign Secretary for 5 years, which is frightening. And you just think these people are, in my mind, massively, massively underachieving, and not surprising when you look at them. But let's talk about the good news, which is why I wanted to get you on. 10 o'clock last night, that YouGov poll came out. Big smile enveloping the face, if you're not watching on screen, of Richard Tice. Reform on 24%. The Labour Party down from 40-something to 25. The Tories in third on 22, and that party led by the man who I still don't know what he stands for. He just wears a wetsuit. The Liberal Democrats on 14. Let me put this to you about reform. For many years, and I'm 60 this year, I was told repeatedly it would always be two-party politics. There would never be proportional representation because the two parties who have had a stranglehold, Labour and Conservative, would never allow that to happen. Increasingly over the last few years, we've seen one in for 5 years or 10 years, and then that goes wrong, and then the next people do the same. To me, what that poll said last night is that reform has simply blown a massive hole in that theory and no longer in this country as of January 2025. Are we just talking about two-party politics, are we?
I think the most important piece of data, obviously, Jeremy, is that you don't look anything like 60. But moving on to the poll, we're obviously delighted by the energy, the momentum, and people realise, frankly, that the Tories broke Britain. The Labour Party is literally in the middle of bankrupting Britain, and you've got some numbers up there. But the real point is people are not being made better off. They weren't made better off by the Tories, and Labour is making people poorer, both in the economy as a whole, but also critically per person. If your economy is flat or going down and you're importing net 50,000 to 750,000 people per year, then we'll get a lot poorer, sadly, very quickly. And these are the things that have got to change. And we've got to basically have an absolute root and branch review and slashing of wasteful government expenditure. We've got to make work pay. We've got to make risk-taking pay. We've got to scrap net zero to lower the bills, reduce the cost of living. And if we do these things, all of a sudden, the economy is going to start growing again. People will start feeling better off. And that's what a government should be focusing on and doing, not disappearing and kowtowing to China.
Is it, you're being sound like Trump. Can I just ask you, is it true, by the way, what I heard today, that Sir Keir Starmer has not been invited to the inauguration of Donald Trump next Thursday? Is that right?
Those are the rumours. Obviously, some people have been invited from the United Kingdom, led by my good friend and leader Nigel Farage. So, I mean, clearly I think even Alex Phillips from Talk Radio's been invited. If Sir Keir Starmer hasn't, that is an absolute... I mean, to me, that's utterly brilliant. But, Richard, I'm interested, right? Oh, hold on, we've got some breaking news, but it's only just come up on my screen. Richard Tice, you won't know this. The anti-corruption minister, Tulip Siddiq, has just resigned from the government. This is breaking news on Talk at 4:12. This is the minister, the anti-corruption minister, whose aunt was the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. She was forced out some months ago. There have been all sorts of conversations about properties in the United Kingdom and legs up and money and all sorts of stuff. Interestingly, Tulip Siddiq, a neighbouring MP to Sir Keir Starmer, always been close. He's done nothing about this. The irony of the anti-corruption Labour minister now having to resign because she's accused of corruption. First response, Richard Tice from Reform. Well, it's not a great look, is it? And frankly, I'm surprised it's taken this long. And whether or not there's any truth to these suggestions that because she's quite a good friend of the Prime Minister, that he was desperately trying to see if she could hang on. But Tulip Siddiq has done the right thing. It's taken too long. It's a terrible look for a government that came in promising integrity and public service and transparency, and it was all going to change after the chaos of the blustering, bungling Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, it seems the Labour Party is struggling themselves. And
I mean, that was always...
not before time.
That was always going to be the thing, wasn't it? When you stand up, I mean, I remember listening to Starmer going on and on about this is a new way of governing and it's not jobs for the boys, it's going to be honest, it's going to be open, it's going to be clear. I mean, this is now everywhere. It's on every screen. Your anti-corruption minister. It's just every single day this man proves, in my humble opinion, that he's out of his depth. And actually, I'm going to say something to defend Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage got a whole load of, let's be honest, crap about his stance on Tommy Robinson. That was his decision as the leader of Reform, and he was very forceful in saying, I don't want that person in my party. Some people jumped up and down and said, oh, that's not right. But that's what you call leadership, whether you agree with that leadership or not. Starmer here should have got rid of the anti-corruption minister a couple of weeks ago. And he looks weak again, doesn't he?
I mean, Nigel and I have been very clear on that point with regard to Mr. Robinson for some time. And I think what Starmer is showing is that actually he is just weak on this stuff. Yeah. And
is he weak on everything, though, Richard? He just doesn't strike me...
We must forget the scandal on all of these expenses, whether it's glasses, whether it's suits, whether it's hospitality tickets and trips. It's a terrible, terrible look at every single level. And you might be more inclined to be generous and forgive a bit of it if the economy was growing, everything was working, you could see a doctor in a day, you could get an operation in a couple of weeks. You might say, well, they've done a great job. Here's a pat on the back and a bit of a bonus. But the reality is not. We're all getting poorer, and all they're doing is, arguably lining their own pockets. And there is no worse look than the anti-corruption czar resigning on allegations of corruption.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you just made a point there, and I've had a text immediately, instantaneously. You said you can't see a doctor. But you can if you're an illegal migrant, because I hear they're sending private GPs to those four-star hotels to make those people all right. The thing for me about reform, and reform isn't perfect, nobody's perfect, but you've got to understand, I think, as a politician, which I think you and Nigel and the team do, is that you've got to understand what the feeling is in the United Kingdom. I think that COVID, I think that the cost of living convinced a lot of what I call hard-working British people who are just surviving, haven't got a lot of spare cash, don't break the law, don't take a handout, that actually they're being screwed. They're third and fourth in the queue, and they've done right by their lives and by their country, and they don't like what they hear. I think it was very easy early on for everybody to jump up and down and say, like UKIP, like the Brexit Party, reform's just it's a movement. But I think that poll last night said that there's a movement in this country of people who are fed up with incompetent politicians who don't seem to understand and gauge what we all want to happen, really. So I see it.
There's an important point about this poll, which is it's from the Rolls-Royce of pollsters, YouGov. It is the creme de la creme, and it's their first poll since the general election 6 months ago. They've tweaked their methodology. And what's interesting is the Labour Party, YouGov's last poll was on July the 3rd, the day before the general election.
It was.
And they showed the Labour Party at 39. Labour got less than 34% in the general election. So YouGov's methodology showed Labour 5 points ahead of where they actually were. And it's interesting now that Labour have come down to 25. I mean, that is a serious collapse.
It is.
And we've obviously seen significant increase. And look, we've basically got a complete reset of British politics. You've got three parties, give or take in the mid-20s, plus or minus the margin of error, with only one party that actually has got a track record of people at the top who know how to make things happen, have got, successful track record of running businesses. Both the other two main parties, frankly, their track record is something to hide away from.
Oh, my God. Richard, I'm so sorry to have to do this to you. You won't have seen this. This man is beyond incompetent. Jesus. In his acceptance letter that's just been released to the press, Sir Keir Starmer, look at your face, I wish they could say it. Back to Tulip Sadiq. What does Sir Keir Starmer say? The door is always open for you. So you were the anti-corruption minister who's had to resign because of allegations of corrupt practices, and our bloody Prime Minister, who can't sort jack, says the door is always open for you. So there you are, people. If you want to be an MP, you want to end up in the cabinet, allegedly you can do things wrong. I mean, that's the wrong message again, man, isn't it?
Well, it's an appalling message. Oh. Maybe he's inviting her to come in with, with a new suit or a new pair of glasses or a suitcase or something for a foreign trip back to China or back to Bangladesh. I mean, the whole thing just beggars belief. It really does. It's a tragic laughing stock.
It is,
and it's why the next general election can't come soon enough, because I think the British people are going to say we're done with all of this. We need to save the country, and that's why I think we've got every prospect that Nigel will be the Prime Minister after the next general election.
And I think a few people, you talked about it just then, and we really appreciate it. You said a reset of British politics. I think that's what that YouGov poll said last night. I think there is something happening, and I think people are listening. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, thank you so much for the time this afternoon. MP for Boston and Skegness.